the chilling question lingered. How did so many young Germans willingly march toward death? Ideology played a role, as did blind obedience. But the answer also lies in a small white pill, Pervitin, methamphetamine. This seemingly innocuous substance transformed soldiers and teenagers into tireless, fearless machines. Thousands of young men, barely boys, grew up steeped in Nazi indoctrination, subtly influenced by this drug that erased exhaustion, numbed empathy, and clouded judgment. The Third Reich perfected dehumanization, not only through propaganda but also through calculated chemistry. This is the story of a nation's desperate pursuit of victory, fueling its youth with a chemical concoction. This wasn't merely an ideological transformation, it was a physical, chemical one. In secret laboratories, under the regime's strict control, the experiment to create perfect instruments of war began. Methamphetamine, or Pervitin, became the Third Reich's hidden chemical weapon, potent, readily available, and profoundly impactful. Fueled by Pervitin, German soldiers seemed unstoppable. A relentless tide of grey uniforms and unwavering conviction. They crossed forests, stormed fields, and conquered villages without sleep. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, focused only on the objective. They obeyed without question. They moved with an unnatural, chemically induced energy, as if fear didn't exist. But it wasn't true courage. It wasn't solely rigorous training, though that played a part. It was chemistry, a dangerous shortcut to perceived strength. A powerful substance coursed through their veins, stripping away hunger and sleep, slowly eroding their humanity. To understand this, one must confront a dark secret. The Nazis strategically used methamphetamine to manipulate their soldiers on an unprecedented scale. This drug, based on methamphetamine, permeated the ranks and infiltrated the culture. It affected not only the soldiers who consumed it, but the course of World War II. The Nazi regime's decision to supply Pervitin stemmed from a chilling combination of strategic and logistical factors, a perceived necessity and the relentless demands of total war. Soldiers were instructed to take 3 to 5 pills daily, a seemingly small amount with devastating cumulative effects. Before the invasion of France, a staggering 35 million doses were ordered, enough to supply 3 million soldiers with a steady stream of chemical courage and stamina. During the Blitzkrieg, fueled by Pervitin, they travelled astonishing distances, up to 35 kilometres a day, often in tanks under intense enemy fire, cutting vital telephone lines and sowing confusion. The relentless pace of war demanded everything from the soldiers, pushing them to their limits. Pervitin's stimulating properties allowed them to march seemingly endlessly without tiring. This chemically enhanced stamina was invaluable during rapid advances. Resting gave the enemy precious time to regroup and counterattack. The drug's ability to keep soldiers awake and alert for extended periods proved crucial for maintaining constant vigilance on the battlefield. It enabled ruthless efficiency during nighttime maneuvers. Beyond the physical, Pervitin was believed to significantly increase soldiers' confidence and morale. The intense euphoria and energy temporarily relieved the immense psychological stress of combat, making soldiers feel invincible and more willing to fight, seemingly immune to the horrors around them. Soldiers numbed by the drug were less likely to hesitate or question orders, even in extreme danger. They were less likely to falter when carrying out risky missions. Pervitin helped them cope, at least temporarily, with the overwhelming stress and trauma of war, providing a dangerous, illusory escape, temporarily suppressed debilitating anxiety, allowing laser-like focus on immediate tasks. Pervitin's ability to enhance performance meant fewer soldiers were needed to achieve objectives. This efficiency, however morally questionable, was crucial as Germany faced growing personnel shortages. The drug's appetite-suppressing effects also reduced the logistical burden of supplying vast armies. It's also likely that instilling fear in the enemy, creating an image of unwavering German soldiers, played a role in the decision to administer Pervitin. British newspapers reported alarming encounters with seemingly fearless, even deranged German stolen soldiers, clearly demonstrating the drug's potent effects and painting a terrifying picture of the enemy. Despite the initial perceived benefits, this chemically induced invincibility was far from perfect. The widespread use of Pervitin, as time would tragically show, had deeply troubling consequences. The Nazi army's initial enthusiasm gradually waned as the war progressed and the devastating negative side effects became increasingly apparent. One significant drawback was severe physical exhaustion. Soldiers fueled by Pervitin pushed their bodies beyond their limits, operating for days or weeks without adequate rest or nourishment. The drug masked the body's warning signals, leading to overexertion. The initial surge of energy gave way to a crippling crash, leaving soldiers depleted and vulnerable. The suppression of hunger and fatigue often meant soldiers neglected their basic needs, resulting in widespread malnutrition and severe sleep deprivation. Their bodies, deprived of essential nutrients and restorative sleep, broke down, becoming more susceptible to illness and injury. The chemically induced stamina masked a slow deterioration of physical well-being. Furthermore, methamphetamine's effects on the brain caused intense mood swings, unpredictable paranoia, and terrifying hallucinations. Soldiers experienced heightened anxiety and were prone to making impulsive, reckless decisions with devastating consequences on the battlefield. Clouded judgment, fueled by paranoia and distorted perceptions, undermined their effectiveness. Many soldiers unknowingly developed a dangerous addiction to Pervitin, triggering a vicious cycle of dependence. The initial benefits were quickly overshadowed by intense cravings and debilitating withdrawal symptoms. They became trapped, reliant on the drug simply to function, their bodies and minds craving the chemical boost. The insidious connection between methamphetamine and World War II tragically demonstrates how little was known about drug addiction at the time. The complexities of dependence and long-term effects were largely misunderstood. Soldiers, viewed as expendable assets, were unwittingly subjected to a dangerous experiment. Today, methamphetamine is rightly considered an addictive and harmful drug. Its use is strictly controlled, and those with a dependence require intensive treatment. The widespread distribution of Pervitin left a lingering chemical legacy, a dark stain on history. The poison of the past stubbornly refuses to disappear. It continues to haunt us. The Nazis presented themselves as paragons of purity, champions of clean living, imposing a strict anti-drug policy enforced with draconian punishments. Yet paradoxically, Pervitin became remarkably popular during Hitler's rule, a glaring hypocrisy that underscores the regime's inherent contradictions. Pervitin thrived throughout the German Reich and later in occupied European countries. This small unassuming pill, once hailed as a miracle cure, became readily available, openly sold in pharmacies across the nation. It wasn't until 1939, as war loomed, that its sale was restricted to prescription only, and it wasn't fully regulated until 1941. Its active ingredient, methamphetamine, is now illegal or strictly regulated almost everywhere. Yet, with over 100 million users and rising, it's disturbingly considered our most popular poison, crystal meth. Produced in clandestine labs, often adulterated with dangerous impurities, it's a far cry from the relatively pure Pervitin of the Nazi era. Generally ingested nasally and often in alarmingly high doses, crystal meth has reached unimaginable levels of popularity across Europe, with an exponential increase in first-time users lured by its promise of euphoria and enhanced performance. The echoes of Pervitin's legacy reverberate through the present. This potent stimulant is often used as a party drug to boost performance at work, even in demanding offices and universities. It eliminates the need for sleep, suppresses hunger, and promises fleeting euphoria. But in its insidious form as crystal meth, it is a potentially destructive and highly addictive substance, a dark inheritance from a desperate past. Few know about its rise in Nazi Germany, its widespread use among soldiers, its calculated deployment as a weapon of war. To understand methamphetamine's historical relevance for the Nazi state, we must go back further in time before the rise of the Third Reich to explore the origins of the pharmaceutical industry that made Pervitin possible. The development of modern societies is as closely tied to the creation and distribution of drugs, both legal and illegal, as the economy is to technological advances. In 1705, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe subtly explored the idea that man's genesis is drug-induced, a profound statement about the human condition. At the same time, in Paderborn, a humble pharmacy assistant, Friedrich Wilhelm Serturner, conducted groundbreaking experiments with the opium poppy. The active ingredient, morphine, provided pain relief, but in varying concentrations, sometimes causing fatal overdoses. Serturner sought to eliminate this inconsistency. Driven by his own inner demons, Serturner made a startling discovery. he isolated morphine, the crucial alkaloid of opium. This marked a turning point in pharmacology, the beginning of modern pain management, one of the most important events of the early 19th century. Pain could now be reliably relieved, even eliminated through precisely measured doses. Across Europe, apothecaries meticulously made pills from ingredients sourced from their own herb gardens or from foragers. This localized system of medicine was about to undergo a dramatic transformation. These local chemists rapidly evolved into factories, establishing pharmaceutical standards, embracing mass production, and fundamentally changing the landscape of medicine. Morphine was a great business opportunity, a source of immense profit and influence. In Darmstadt, Emanuel Merck established a business model for supplying medicines of consistent quality, setting a new standard for the industry. This was the birth of the Merck Company, a global pharmaceutical giant, and the modern pharmaceutical industry as a whole. When injections were invented in the 1850s, morphine's widespread adoption accelerated. It was extensively used in the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War, cementing its role as an indispensable tool in modern warfare. Morphine doses became standard procedure on the battlefield. This seemingly simple change was crucial. The agonizing pain of severely wounded soldiers could now be effectively controlled, enabling a new, more brutal scale of warfare. Fighters previously ruled out of combat due to injuries recovered relatively quickly and returned to the front lines. With morphine, pain relief and anesthesia reached a crucial peak, changing how we deal with suffering worldwide. Pharmacies throughout the United States began selling liquids containing morphine, and cocaine-infused beverages, such as Coca-Cola, were widely used to combat low spirits. The stage was set for an explosion of pharmaceutical innovation. The burgeoning pharmaceutical industry needed to diversify to cater to a growing market. The race was on to discover the next blockbuster drug. On August 10, 1897, Felix Hoffmann successfully synthesized acetyl salicylic acid from willow bark aspirin. 11 days later, he invented another substance, diacetyl morphine, or heroin. Heroin entered the market with a confident flourish, marketed as a remedy for a wide range of ailments, even as a cough syrup for children, a disturbing example of ethical lapses. The business thrived for Bayer and countless other companies. In the last third of the 19th century, new pharmaceutical hubs developed along the Rhine River, transforming the region into a vibrant centre of chemical innovation and production. The chemical industry required relatively little specialised equipment, making it accessible to a wider range of entrepreneurs. What mattered most was the developers' intuition and knowledge of creating new compounds. Germany, rich in human capital, and with an exemplary educational system, had a distinct competitive advantage. Science and business worked hand in hand, fueling rapid growth and intense competition. Germany quickly became the undisputed workshop of the world for chemicals. Made in Germany became a guarantee of quality, propelling German pharmaceutical companies to global dominance. This didn't significantly change even after World War I. While France and Britain acquired natural stimulants from their colonies, Germany, having lost its colonies, was forced to look for synthetic solutions to fuel its economy. Stimulants had to be produced synthetically, a necessity that drove innovation and shaped the future of the German pharmaceutical industry. Germany urgently needed synthetic solutions to the challenges it faced after the war. The conflict had inflicted deep wounds, leaving its citizens weary and demoralized. In the turbulent 1920s, medicines gained increasing importance, offering solace and escape from harsh realities. The widespread desire for sedation spurred self-education and experimentation, leading to a vast amount of technical knowledge for producing various remedies, both legal and illicit. The path was set for a prosperous pharmaceutical industry, one that would play a crucial role in Germany's economic recovery. Many of the chemical substances we know today were developed and patented in a remarkably short period of time. German companies quickly became leaders in the global market, dominating production and distribution. They not only produced the greatest quantity of medications, but also supplied most of the essential chemical raw materials worldwide. A new economy emerged, fueled by chemical innovation and pharmaceutical production. The Rhine Valley became a hub of scientific and industrial activity. Small companies thrived, becoming influential players in the global market. In 1925, the largest chemical factories in Germany united to form IG Farben, one of the most powerful and influential companies in the world. Opiates remained a German specialty. In 1926, Germany led the world in morphine production and was the undisputed world leader in heroin exports. Staggering 98% of its production was exported, supplying global demand. Between 1925 and 1930, an astonishing 91 tons of morphine were produced in Germany, accounting for roughly 40% of global production. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany signed the League of Nations International Opium Convention in 1925, but it wasn't ratified until 1929. The local alkaloid industry still processed over 200 tons of opium in 1928, highlighting the scale of the German drug trade. Germans were also world leaders in stimulants. Merck, Boehringer and Knoll collectively controlled 80% of the global cocaine market. Merck's cocaine, produced in Darmstadt, was widely seen as the best in the world. Hamburg was the main European market for raw cocaine, a crucial hub for the global drug trade. Peru sold its entire annual production of raw cocaine to Germany. The influential Fachgruppe Opium and Cocaine, expert group on opium and cocaine, a lobbying organization created by German drug manufacturers, worked tirelessly to integrate government and the chemical industry. Two powerful cartels divided the global market, with Merck leading in both opiates and cocaine. The Weimar Republic, despite its progressive ideals, was flooded with psychoactive substances. People often preferred to flee into imaginary worlds fueled by drugs rather than face reality. Berlin nightlife became a dizzying kaleidoscope of vice and artistic expression. Klaus Mann lamented, "We used to have a great army. Now we have great perversions," capturing the sentiment of moral decline. Berlin became synonymous with moral condemnation, a symbol of decadence and excess. When the German currency collapsed, plunging the nation into hyperinflation, moral values seemed to collapse along with it. Everything disintegrated in a toxicological frenzy. The pursuit of artificial highs became a widespread form of escapism. Anita Berber, a notorious actress and dancer, dipped white rose petals in chloroform and ether for breakfast, a shocking example of the era's embrace of dangerous habits. Films about cocaine and morphine were regularly shown in cinemas, and drugs were readily available. In Friedrichshain, Chinese merchants ran secretive opium dens. Illegal nightclubs opened in the Mittes district, catering to a clientele seeking forbidden pleasures. Smugglers advertised illegal parties, attracting huge crowds of pleasure seekers. Large clubs like the Haus Vaterland and smaller, more intimate venues attracted crowds. A nascent form of sex and drug tourism began, drawn by Berlin's cheap thrills and unbridled freedoms. Posters warned, "Berlin, breathe. Remember that your dance partner is death." In 1928, a staggering 73 kilograms of morphine and heroin were legally sold by prescription in Berlin alone. Cocaine spread like wildfire, becoming a potent symbol of the era's extravagance and excess. It was also considered a degenerate poison by many, disapproved of by both communists and Nazis. A violent backlash against the carefree zeitgeist was brewing. German nationalists ranted against moral decay, decrying the perceived erosion of traditional values. The bourgeoisie, feeling marginalized, condemned the mass pleasure culture. The Nazis vehemently opposed the Weimar period's pharmacological quest for salvation. They offered a different, equally dangerous form of escapism, ideological salvation, a return to traditional values and renewed national pride. For them, only one legitimate form of intoxication existed: the swastika. National Socialism aspired to a transcendental state, a state of collective euphoria and unwavering devotion to the Führer. The Nazi world of illusions, using manipulative techniques of intoxication, created a sense of belonging and purpose while suppressing critical thought. These carefully orchestrated events were complemented by the violent frenzies of the Sturmabteilung, SA, often fueled by alcohol, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The idea was to replace politics with a state of social intoxication, a shared delusion uniting the masses. If the Weimar Republic can be seen as a repressed society grappling with trauma and uncertainties, the National Socialists offered a different, equally dangerous form of escapism. They hated drugs in the traditional sense because they wanted to be the drug themselves. Otto Friedrich Ranke, the introducer of methamphetamine into the German army, was a complex figure driven by ambition, scientific curiosity, and a deep-seated desire to serve his country. His appointment as director of the Institute for Defense Physiology Research would have a profound impact on the course of the war. Physiology was a relatively marginal discipline, often overshadowed by more specialized fields. Defense physiology addressed the specific strains placed on soldiers, aiming to enhance their performance under extreme conditions. The army increasingly viewed soldiers as animated machines, efficient cogs in a larger system. Ranke's primary task was to protect soldiers from wear and tear, ensuring they could continue to function effectively. His role was to optimize their physical and mental capabilities. In addition to being a physician and researcher, Ranke was also an inventor, developing sighting devices, dustproof goggles, bulletproof helmets, and directional microphones for the military. Ranke's institute was a section of the Military Medical Academy in Berlin. From 1934 to 1945, it trained promising medical officers, preparing them for the challenges of modern warfare. This prestigious institution had the largest medical and scientific library in Europe, a fully equipped laboratory, auditoriums, reading rooms, and a residential block for aspiring medical officers. The complex also included gyms, swimming pools, a riding hall with 90 horses, and stables, reflecting the importance of cavalry and animal husbandry in the military at the time. The scientific departments were located in the large block at the back of the inner courtyard. The Institute for Defense Physiology Research, led by Ranke, consisted of one assistant physician, 3 resident doctors, and a few civilian administrative staff. But Ranke wanted to expand his department, and he planned to do so through Pervitin. Ranke had one primary enemy: fatigue. A sleeping soldier is a useless soldier, unable to act, incapable of defending himself or his comrades. Fatigue impairs coordination, leads to random firing, and causes accidents. Ranke declared that the fight against exhaustion was his top priority. In the spring of 1938, Ranke read a glowing report on Pervitin and became immediately alert. The report stated that Pervitin helped subjects achieve a 20% increase in lung capacity and absorb greater amounts of oxygen, an irresistible prospect for a man dedicated to optimizing soldiers' physical capabilities. He immediately decided to conduct his own experiments, testing an increasing number of doctors, first 90, then 150. He organized blind voluntary trials, administering Pervitin, caffeine, or placebo pills. The test subjects had to solve challenging math and logic problems all night long until 4 o'clock the following afternoon. The results seemed overwhelmingly positive. By dawn, the men who'd been given placebos or caffeine had their heads slumped on their desks, completely exhausted. The Pervitin group was still working frantically, their faces seemingly fresh and alert. However, not all of Ranke's findings were entirely positive. Tasks requiring complex problem-solving and critical thinking were not performed particularly well by Pervitin users. Calculations were completed faster but contained more errors. Pervitin prevented people from sleeping, but it didn't necessarily make them smarter. Ranke concluded that Pervitin was ideal for soldiers engaged in repetitive tasks requiring stamina and alertness. He suggested conducting broader tests in regular military units. Initially, his request fell on deaf ears. Bureaucratic inertia and skepticism hampered his efforts. Military leaders were hesitant to embrace such a radical departure from traditional methods. While Ranke envisioned a soldier of the future whose equipment would include synthetic alkaloids, his superiors were still debating whether to give the troops wholemeal or white bread. Gottfried Benn, a Berlin physician and author, eloquently wrote, "Powerful brains are not strengthened with milk but with alkaloids," a sentiment that resonated deeply with Ranke's own beliefs. Knowledge of Pervitin and its effects quickly spread among young doctors, who began consuming more and more of it. Ranke discovered this troubling trend and learned that a ward had to be opened at the University of Munich specifically for Pervitin corpses. He realized the potential danger and the risks of uncontrolled drug use. He acknowledged that high-dose consumption was common at his own military medical academy. The results of those under the influence left much to be desired. A concerned colleague wrote, In cases where pharmacological assistance was admitted, the exam results were extraordinarily poor, highlighting the detrimental effects of Pervitin on cognitive function when taken in excessive amounts. Ranker hastily cancelled a Pervitin experiment planned for 1939 and sent a stern letter to other institute directors, warning them of the dangers of addiction and urging them to ban Pervitin within the academy. But the genie was already out of the bottle. Methamphetamine continued to spread. The last days of peace were marked by a growing sense of unease and impending doom. Medical officers prepared for their imminent deployment to Poland and bought everything they could from the pharmacy. Since Pervitin was not yet officially supplied by the Wehrmacht, Ranker could only watch as the situation spiraled out of control. Less than a week before the war began, he wrote to a military chief surgeon expressing his concerns, acknowledging the potential for abuse and the difficulty of controlling its use. His warnings came too late. An uncontrolled, large-scale experiment began. With enormous quantities of Pervitin readily available and without clear instructions on dosage, the Wehrmacht launched its attack on Poland, unleashing the full power of its chemically enhanced army. Medical service reports on methamphetamine used during the attack on Poland fill entire files at the military archive in Freiburg. The records are not complete or representative, but they reflect the chaotic nature of the drug's deployment. There was no planned investigation, as the substance had not been distributed systematically. When crossing the Vistula River, the 3rd Panzer Division reported the following observations. Euphoria is often experienced in increased attention span, clear performance enhancement, work is done effortlessly, a pronounced alertness effect, and a feeling of freshness. The drug seemed to lift soldiers' moods and alleviate the psychological stress of combat. War was seen as a task to be carried out, and the drug seemed to help tank units avoid thinking too much about what they were doing, allowing them to focus solely on their objective. A numbing effect facilitated violence, mental spirits high, very stimulated, no accidents, lasting effect. The drug seemed to instill enthusiasm and obedience, making soldiers more willing to follow orders without question. After taking 4 pills, double vision and colours, even mild hallucinations clearly perceived as pleasant, delighted the men. The feeling of hunger decreases. A particularly beneficial aspect is the emergence of a strong drive to work. The effect is so clear that it cannot be attributed to imagination. The drug's appetite-suppressing effects enhanced motivation. A high-ranking lieutenant recounted his positive experience, stating he experienced no side effects and maintained full intellectual alertness for 3 days and nights. He negotiated with the Russians, dividing up the country, chilling example of how methamphetamine could be used to enhance diplomatic negotiations. When he encountered Polish defenders on the way back, methamphetamine made him particularly alert, enabling him to react quickly and decisively. For many soldiers, the drug seemed to be the ideal companion on the battlefield. It deactivated inhibitions which facilitated combat, pulling out stuck tanks, shooting or carrying out other automated maneuvers. The drug seemed to enhance every aspect of the attack. A medical officer from the 9th Army Corps was effusive in his praise. I am convinced that in major offensives, a unit equipped with Pervitin is superior. Another report stated, we must especially highlight the excellent effect on work capacity and morale among the severely burdened officers at division headquarters. This heightened attention was not limited to tank drivers, a high-ranking military doctor wrote. Men were expected to make enormous efforts in intense heat, extremely dusty conditions, and on poor roads during long trips. The pills were distributed without stating their purpose, but their striking effect soon made it clear to the crews what they were supposed to do. A senior staff physician reported that many accidents, mostly attributable to excessive fatigue, could have been avoided if Pervitin had been administered. However, there were also critical voices. The army physician of the 6th Army collected reports and wrote to Ranker, "These contradictory reports make it abundantly clear that Pervitin is not a harmless drug. It does not seem at all appropriate for it to be distributed randomly among the troops." Nevertheless, curiosity had been sparked. The final sentence of the 4th Army Corps report reads, "To continue the experiments, a larger quantity of Pervitin tablets is required, highlighting the growing interest in the drug and the desire to further explore its potential applications. The legacy of Pervitin, a complex mix of innovation and ethical compromise, continues to resonate. The initial enthusiasm for Pervitin's battlefield performance, documented in numerous reports from the early days of World War II, gradually gave way to a more nuanced understanding of its effects and a growing awareness of its potential dangers. The reports from the Polish campaign, while initially overwhelmingly positive, hinted at the darker side of the drug. Soldiers described experiences ranging from heightened alertness and improved performance to disturbing instances of erratic behavior, hallucinations, and a detachment from the realities of combat. As the war progressed, the Wehrmacht's initial reliance on Pervitin gradually diminished. This wasn't a sudden policy shift, but a slow realization of the cumulative negative consequences. The initial bursts of energy were often followed by debilitating crashes, leaving soldiers physically and mentally depleted. The constant state of hyper-alertness induced by the drug, while useful in the short term, took a significant toll on the soldiers' mental health. Reports of paranoia, anxiety, and severe mood swings became increasingly common. The drug's appetite-suppressing effects resulted in widespread malnutrition and sleep deprivation, weakening the soldiers' immune systems and making them more vulnerable to disease and injury. The long-term health consequences of Pervitin use were devastating, further compounded by the lack of adequate medical care and resources available on the front lines. The soldiers' bodies and minds were pushed to their breaking point, leading to a significant number of casualties far beyond those inflicted by enemy fire. The haphazard distribution of Pervitin, without clear guidelines on dosage or responsible use, further exacerbated the problems. Some soldiers received excessive amounts, leading to severe side effects and addiction. Others received insufficient amounts or none at all, negating the supposed benefits. The inconsistent use of the drug across different units also hampered attempts to objectively assess its impact on the battlefield effectiveness. Reports varied widely, making it difficult to draw firm conclusions about whether Pervitin had actually given the German army a significant advantage. The ethical considerations surrounding the widespread use of Pervitin in the Wehrmacht continued to be a subject of intense debate and scrutiny. The decision to use a potent stimulant on soldiers without their full informed consent raised profound questions about the boundaries of medical ethics, particularly in the context of a brutal war. The initial successes on the battlefield, however, did not justify this morally problematic approach. The short-term gains were far outweighed by the long-term consequences for the health and well-being of countless soldiers. The use of Pervitin also raises questions about the Nazi regime's manipulation and control over its military personnel. The widespread use of Pervitin became a microcosm of the larger ethical failures of the Nazi regime. The disregard for human life and well-being, the prioritization of military goals over individual needs, and the cynical manipulation of soldiers through chemical means all served to highlight the regime's inherent cruelty and disregard for fundamental human rights. The story of Pervitin is not just a tale of a drug and its impact on the battlefield, it's also a story about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the terrible consequences of prioritizing efficiency and power above human compassion and ethical responsibility. It's a stark reminder of the importance of informed consent, responsible medical practice, and a deep respect for human dignity. As the war progressed and Germany's military fortunes began to turn, the use of Pervitin became less prevalent. The initial optimism surrounding the drug faded, replaced by a more somber and realistic appraisal of its limitations and negative effects. The Wehrmacht's leadership gradually recognized that the long-term costs associated with Pervitin use far outweighed any short-term gains on the battlefield. The legacy of Pervitin serves as a grim reminder of the dangers of relying on chemical enhancements to achieve military objectives. The consequences of the Nazi regime's use of the drug, both the immediate physical and psychological harm to soldiers and the longer-term societal repercussions, underscore the importance of ethical considerations in warfare. The experiences of the soldiers during and after the war highlight the enduring human cost of chemical warfare and the critical need for responsible drug use and ethical decision-making in all contexts. The story of Pervitin offers a cautionary tale for future generations, emphasizing the importance of a holistic approach to human health and well-being, prioritizing ethical considerations above expedient gains, and upholding fundamental human rights in all circumstances. The tragic use of this substance in the context of World War II serves as a persistent reminder of the darkest aspects of human behavior and the importance of learning from history's mistakes. The long shadow of Pervitin continues to cast a cautionary light on the complexities of war and the crucial role of ethical decision-making in both military strategy and medical practice. The history of Pervitin also underscores the complex relationship between scientific advancement and its potential for misuse. While the discovery of methamphetamine and its initial applications offered a glimpse into potential benefits, it also revealed the profound risks associated with its unregulated and unethical application. The tragic events of the Second World War highlight the critical need for stringent ethical guidelines in research, development, and the deployment of any substance that could potentially impact human well-being. This crucial balance between innovation and responsibility must remain paramount in future advancements.